Let's dive in. We're going to unpack this incredible story today, one that spans continents, centuries, really. We're
Absolutely.
talking about the multi-generational journey of the McCrimmon family.
Mm-hmm.
You know, starting as actual bagpiping royalty in Scotland
Mm-hmm.
and then becoming pioneers out on the American frontier.
Yeah,
It's quite the saga.
it really is.
Our deep dive today, it's based on this really comprehensive source titled The Mighty McCrimmons, Your Story by WHB. And honestly, it brings history to life in a way that lets you trace this lineage through some major historical moments.
Yeah, and our mission here really is to pull out the most compelling stuff from this detailed story that WHB put together. We want to help you connect the dots, between these big historical shifts and this very personal family legacy.
Right.
What's so fascinating, I think, is how this one family story sort of mirrors the bigger currents of history. You go from, like, clan life in Scotland.
Yeah, tradition bound.
Exactly, where their music was everything.
Yeah.
To the tough, tough settlement of America forging a new identity. We'll dig into the specifics the author found, but also step back and see that wider context that shaped their, well, frankly, their extraordinary journey.
It shows how tied together individual lives in the big sweep of history really are.
Totally.
Absolutely. So let's start right at the beginning, those deep Scottish roots. You hear McCrimmon, you pretty much hear Scotland, right?
You really do. The sound of the pipes.
And your story by WHB, it kicks things off with the earliest known ancestor they could trace using Y-DNA matching. A guy named Padruag Og McCrimmon, born around 1645. And you need to grasp just how significant this guy was, not just for the family, but for the whole culture, the music. He's identified as your 8th great-grandfather,
Wow.
which tells you right away this is a direct line to what the author calls bagpiping royalty. And Padruga wasn't just some piper. He was the 5th hereditary piper to the chiefs of Clan MacLeod.
That's a huge title.
It is. This wasn't a side gig. It was a generational responsibility,
Yeah.
a role steeped in honor, duty within one of Scotland's most powerful clans. For centuries, his appointment in 1670 just carried on this incredible legacy.
Yeah, and WHB makes a point. There were 3 main piping families back then: McCrimmons, Rankins, Campbells of Netherlorn,
Okay?
and the McCrimmons. WHB says they were arguably the mightiest of them all. Just think about that. For over 300 years, your ancestors served the MacLeods, not just playing tunes in the castle.
Right, not just background music.
No, they were on the battlefield. Imagine the sound of those pipes cutting through the chaos, rallying warriors, giving signals, or, playing these heart-wrenching laments after a loss.
It gives you chills thinking about it.
It does. And this service, it defined them, linked their name forever to Clan MacLeod. And it wasn't just playing either. The author points out the family pioneered bagpiping into the musical art form that has made Scotland itself famous.
So they were innovators, too.
Big time. Composing complex music P.O.B. reached, or Siolmore, the great music, and really elevating it to this high art form, almost academic. If you connect that to the bigger picture, you see just how deep this family ran in Scottish identity. Their music became Scottish music, in a way.
And you can almost feel that history when you look at the places mentioned in your story by WHB. Their home base, the Isle of Skye, iconic, right?
Yeah.
Rugged, beautiful. You just feel the history there.
Oh, yeah. Mists and mountains.
And central to everything was Dunvegan Castle, the MacLeod chief's seat. That's where their loyalty, their music was always needed, right at the center of clan power.
The heart of it all.
The very first piping college they had was at a place called Geltrigill. But then Padruag Og, the guy we mentioned, your 8X great-grandfather, he moved it. Big decision.
Or led to Borreg.
Exactly. And then there's St. Mary's Church in Kilmere, kind of poignant. That's the cemetery where 10 generations of McCrimmons are buried. 10 generations.
Wow, that's a connection.
It really is. And finally, Borreg, the famous McCrimmon Piping College site, where the cairn stands today as a tribute. These aren't just names on a map. They're like physical anchors to their history, their land, their music. Now, this is where the story gets really interesting, because the origin story people believed for ages. Well, it might not be the whole picture, according to modern research.
Right, the plot thickens.
Your story by WHB dives into this historical debate. Back in 1828, Captain Neil MacLeod of Gesto, a MacLeod descendant, respected guy, he published this book. And he claimed the McCrimmons came from Italy.
Italy? Really?
Yeah, specifically Cremona. He said there's this priest, Giuseppe Bruno, whose son, Petrus Bruno, born around 1475, went to Ulster in Ireland around 1510.
Okay.
Petrus supposedly married into the McKinnon piping family there and changed his name, Anglicized it, to McCrimmon. It's a neat story, right? Italian musical roots explaining their talent.
It sounds plausible, I guess. Connects the dots.
But, history loves a twist. And science, especially genetics, has thrown a wrench in that old story.
Ah, the DNA evidence. That changes things.
Exactly. Modern scholars, they mostly think the name McCrimmon comes from Old Norse. Through the Gaelic MacCrimmon, meaning son of Ruaman.
MacCrimmon, okay. And Ruaman itself might come from the Old Norse name Hrobundur, which apparently means something like fame and protection. Kind of fitting, actually.
Fame and protection. Yeah, that works.
But the real kicker, the truly groundbreaking part, is recent Y-DNA testing on ancient DNA samples.
Ancient DNA, like really old.
Yeah, from places like Norway and Greenland. And these ancient samples, they positively match living McCrimmons.
Whoa. Okay, so that's direct genetic proof.
Pretty much confirms it. It strongly suggests the McCrimmon line likely descends from Vikings who settled the Hebrides like over 1,000 years ago. They mixed with the locals, became part of the clan system.
So Vikings, not Italians.
Looks that way. And it raises this important question, right? How do we piece together history? Do we stick with one old published story, even Gestos? Or do we follow the genetics that trace lines back millennia? The DNA points to a much older Norse origin.
That's fascinating. And the name itself kind of shows that mix, doesn't it? The author lists all these different spellings over time.
Oh, yeah, it's all over the place.
McCrimmon in 1614, McCrimmon, McCrimmon, and McCrimmon. It keeps shifting.
Which makes sense, right? Gaelic, Norse, English, all mixing together on Skye. Scribes writing things down differently.
And that Norse influence, it's still there on Skye, isn't it? WHB mentions village names with Norse origins.
Sligatan, Courtry.
Right. And even today, they have that Winter Fire Festival at Dunvegan where they burn a Viking longboat replica.
Wow, keeping the heritage alive.
Yeah. And it makes you think, even Samuel Johnson back in 1775 noticed how abundant Skye was. Cattle, sheep, supporting different cultures over time. That Norse layer runs deep. So from those deep roots, let's get back to that golden age of piping education under Padruig Og McCrimmon, your 8th great-grandfather, the 5th hereditary piper.
Right, the master teacher.
Exactly. The author makes this great distinction. His father, Padrig Moore, who lived roughly 1595 to 1670, he was seen as the greatest composer. Think McCrimmon's Sweetheart, Lament for the Children, masterpieces.
Iconic tunes.
But Padruig Og,
Yeah.
remembered as the greatest teacher. That shift is key. It's about passing on the art, systematizing it. He took over as hereditary piper in 1670 when his dad died, and really shaped the future of piping.
And what's truly fascinating and tells you how much they valued this is just the sheer rigor involved in becoming a master piper under him. It wasn't just learning tunes.
No, it was serious study.
Totally. WHB highlights Padruig Og's big move, taking the college from Galtragill to Borereg, a more dedicated spot. And that transformed Borereg into, quote, the most renowned piping institution in the British Isles.
Premier League of Piping.
Pretty much. Students, often from noble families, lived and studied there for 7 years. Full immersion, intense practice, theory, structure, emotion of Chelmore.
7 years. Wow.
And get this, the graduation requirement. You had to know 196 tunes by heart, each one up to 15 minutes long.
196 tunes. That's insane memory work.
And understanding, it wasn't just memorizing, it was deep knowledge. You got this certificate of Master of Composition and Theory of Pipe Music, like graduating from a top conservatory today. It ensured graduates were true masters, scholars of the instrument.
That relationship with the MacLeods, it had these unique perks that show how vital the McCrimmons were.
Yeah, the rent deal.
Right. MacLeod accounts, mentioned by WHB, they talk about this sort of unspoken agreement. The McCrimmon property at Borereg, exempt from rent.
Which was huge back then. Land and rent were everything.
Totally. And this wasn't just a favor. It lasted as long as there was at least one family member trained up to be the next hereditary piper. It guaranteed the music continued.
A built-in succession plan.
Exactly. So what does this mean? It just shouts how incredibly valuable their skill was, how deep the ties were with Clan MacLeod. Their art wasn't just nice to have, it was essential to the clan's identity, its status, maybe even its soul. worth actual economic privilege.
A bond forged over centuries, literally woven into the fabric of the clan system.
But, well, golden ages don't always last, do they? Things took a pretty somber turn with the failed Jacobite Rising of 1745.
Yeah, a really pivotal, tragic moment.
And Your Story by WHB zeroes in on a really personal story from that time. The death of Donald Ban McCrimmon at the Rat of Moy.
Pádraig Og's son.
Right, born around 1710. He's actually one of the potential candidates for your seventh great-grandfather. And here's a twist: he was fighting against the Jacobite.
With Lord Lairdon's regiment loyal to the crown.
Yeah, the MacLeod chief had sided with the Hanoverians, but the story, the lore that WHB recounts is just heartbreaking. Donald Ban apparently saw his death coming.
Composed his own lament.
He composed, McCrimmon will never return Chatel McCrimmon before the battle, like a premonition.
Yeah.
And he was killed at Moy. A huge personal loss, but one that echoed across the Highlands.
And Sir Walter Scott later wrote about it too, right? In McCrimmon's Lament?
He did. It shows how deeply that moment resonated culturally.
And Donald Ban's personal tragedy, as WHB lays out, it ties right into the much bigger, devastating fallout from that failed rebellion.
The crackdown.
Oh, yeah. King George II, the Hanoverian king, he came down hard, dismantled the whole Scottish clan system. It wasn't just political, it was a deliberate attempt to wipe out a way of life.
Brutal reprisals.
Absolutely. The Act of Prescription in 1746, that was aimed right at Highlander culture. Banned kilts, tartans, carrying weapons. The penalties were severe fines, jail, forced army service, even deportation.
Trying to erase their identity.
Exactly. If you connect this to the bigger picture, it's a clear, systematic effort to force assimilation, to break the Highland spirit. And it forced huge changes, ultimately fueling that massive wave of emigration later on. It was the beginning of the end for the traditional clan system.
And those sharp winds of change, as WHB calls them, they weren't just cultural. The economics got brutal too. The first wave of Highland clearances started up.
Landlords chasing sheep profits.
Basically, landlords were stressed by debt, saw sheep farming was more profitable, so they jacked up rents, kicked people off land they'd farmed for generations to make bigger sheep runs.
Devastating for ordinary folk.
Totally. Taxmen, the little guys who held land for the chief crowds, they lost their status, their land. Proud farmers became crofters, crammed onto tiny bits of poor land, just scraping by.
Or forced into other work.
Yeah, horrible jobs in fish factories or quarries, a world away from their old life. And WHB notes, even the MacLeods, supposedly the kindest landlords in Scotland, couldn't stop these huge economic forces.
The pressure was immense.
So staying in Scotland started looking pretty bleak. Families, including the McCrimmons, began to look to the great new hope of America.
And tracing that specific line gets clearer with the DNA again. Pádraig Og, despite the hardships, he had a huge family.
20 sons, WHB says.
At least one daughter and 20 strong and powerful sons, yeah. Though only 7 are recorded as definitely reaching adulthood. Shows you how tough life was.
Who are the main ones?
The records mention Farquhar Angus, Peter, John, Malcolm, Donald Ban, the one killed at Moy, and Donald Don. Malcolm actually followed his dad as the 6th hereditary piper.
Okay, so he stayed.
Right, but the Y-DNA analysis WHB details, matching your great-uncle's DNA to the 10th hereditary piper, confirms Pádraig Og as your 8th great-grandfather. And crucially, it points to one of Pádraig Og's other sons, not Malcolm, as your 7th great-grandfather.
Ah, so the line that left Scotland.
Exactly. And it was that son's child, born around the 1740s, right in the thick of all this turmoil, who was the first in your direct line to make it to North Carolina. That's the start of the American branch. Shows how genetics can fill gaps where paper trails run cold.
So the stage is set. That journey to the New World. It was full of hope, but man, it was dangerous.
Incredibly so.
Your Story by WHB talks about the very first big group of Highlanders heading to North Carolina. Arrived on a ship, the Thistle, in Brunswick Town, 1739.
Quite early on.
Yeah, 350 folks from Argyle. And they were drawn by these amazing offers from the governor, Gabriel Johnston. Free land, and get this, 10 years tax-free.
Wow, imagine hearing that back in Scotland.
Seriously, after struggling for land for generations, huge appeal. So they made this tough 90-mile trek up the Cape Fear Valley to Bladen County, later Cumberland County. And that area, WHB says, became the heartland of the North Carolina Scots, the hub for everyone who followed.
And news of this fertile and cheap land just exploded back in Scotland, fueled this massive emigration, what WHB calls the Great Wave.
More and more people wanted out.
Oh, yeah. There were surges around the Revolutionary War, but the biggest rush was the early 1770s. It got so big, the British authorities actually got worried.
Worried about losing people.
Definitely. Losing tenants, losing potential soldiers. WHB gives us a great example. Lord Fortrose was so alarmed by how many ships were leaving in 1773, he actually left London, went all the way to the Isle of Lewis to beg his tenants not to go.
Offered them better rents.
He even offered the old lower rents. Shows you the desperation on both sides. It really raises that question about the pressures pushing people out, economic hardship, lack of opportunity, forcing them to leave everything behind.
And the journey itself, the human cost was just staggering. WHB gives some hard numbers. Passage cost £3.10 per person.
Which was a fortune.
It was, especially when WHB says families usually only carried about £4 total to start their new life. The trip basically wiped them out financially before they even arrived.
Betting everything.
Literally. And many paid with their lives. WHB cites this awful example of a ship from Dornoch arriving in New York in 1773, lost 100 out of 1,500 passengers on the way.
Terrible conditions, overcrowding, disease.
Typhus, smallpox, dysentery. These weren't pleasure cruises. And this is the journey your fifth great-grandfather, Angus McCrimmon, took as a kid with his parents. Imagine being a child on one of those ships.
Terrifying, the uncertainty, the danger, all for a chance at something better. Now, pinning down Angus's exact arrival is tricky because the Skye parish records only start late, around the 1790s.
Right, gaps in the paperwork.
But North Carolina records show Angus was born on Skye around 1765, and WHB points to Scottish newspaper reports from the time tracking the main Skye departures for North Carolina.
The big groups we mentioned.
Exactly, 1,200 in 1770, 300 in 1771, another 800 in 1773. Huge numbers leaving Skye specifically for NC. We also know Angus's cousins, Donald Daniel and Donald Rood of McCrimmon, were already settled in Anson County, NC by 1772-73.
So family was already there.
Right. And WHB notes that ships basically stopped coming during the Revolutionary War, 1775-83. The next big wave wasn't until the 1800s, so putting it all together.
He likely came on the 1771 or 1773 ship.
That's the most logical window, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Landing with his family, probably settling initially in Moore County, North Carolina, part of that Cumberland region, ready to start over.
So Angus and his family, they barely get their feet on the ground, maybe unpack their bags, and boom, the American Revolution kicks off in 1775.
Talk about timing.
Right. And this throws the whole Highland community in Carolina into turmoil because loyalties were split right down the middle.
Which seems odd, right? They fled British rule. Why side with them?
It's complex. Some are patriots, sure. But WHB says the majority of Carolina Highlanders were loyalists. Why? Fear, mostly. Fear of British reprisals if the rebellion failed. They remembered what happened after the Jacobite risings.
And fear of losing their land.
Exactly. The land the crown had just granted them. They didn't want to risk losing the very thing they'd crossed an ocean for. So for the McCrimmon family, the war literally split them. Some fought, some stayed out of it.
And WHB details some specific McCrimmon involvement. Those cousins we mentioned, Donald Daniel and Donald Rood McCrimmon, they joined the British Legion.
Fought for the crown.
Yep. Donald Rood was at that key battle of Moore's Creek Bridge in 76. Big loyalist defeat. Half the regiment captured, many killed.
But he got away.
Miraculously, yeah. Hid out in the swamps for 2 years, then made his way north and joined Tarleton's Legion. Fought on, even became a lieutenant. He and Donald Daniel ended up settling in Canada on land grants for soldiers.
Wow, so their loyalty took them north.
It did. But Angus and his immediate family, looks like they stayed neutral. WHB points to the lack of military records for them, and crucially the fact they stayed in Cumberland County.
Which became risky for loyalists.
Very risky after Moore's Creek Bridge. The Patriots captured muster lists and started hunting down loyalists. Staying put suggests Angus's family kept their heads down. It really highlights those tough choices, ideology versus survival.
And in this new, challenging world, these Highlanders started becoming something they mostly weren't back in Scotland.
Landowners.
Their own masters.
Exactly. WHB puts it nicely. Folks who were bound by their lords for generations became their own lords on their own land. A huge shift. And for Angus McCrimmon, he hit that milestone in 1792 after marrying your fifth great-grandmother, Margaret Cochrane, claimed 60 acres in Cumberland County.
Whereabouts was that?
Off the old Morganton Road near modern Southern Pines, James Creek area, foot of a ridge called Mount Helicon. WHB describes it as sandy hills, pine forests. Forestry was big, plus crops like corn, rye, peas, sweet potatoes, flax, cotton.
Typical subsistence farming.
Pretty much. And Angus built up some livestock, too. By his death in 1819, he had 30 cattle, 11 sheep. Shows he was making a go of it, building a life. And what's really striking, again, is this family's focus on education, even out on the frontier.
That Skye tradition carrying on.
Absolutely. Your fourth great-grandfather, Daniel McCrimmon Sr., born in NC around 1798, first generation born in America, him and his 7 siblings. WHB emphasizes that literature and education seem to be an important tenet in Angus and Margaret's home.
Like Samuel Johnson noticed back on Skye.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Johnson being surprised to find books in multiple languages in Highland homes. And WHB gives this amazing example. Angus adopted a 1-year-old girl, Margaret MacLeod, specifically to cause her to be taught to read and write.
Wow. Adopted her just for education.
Seems that way. Shows how much they valued it. And the result? All the kids could read and write, probably bilingual too, English and Gaelic. Gaelic was still widely spoken there. WHB even mentions McCrimmon's sisters teaching Gaelic in a local dame school. They were holding on to their culture through education.
And the music. That didn't stop either. Angus and other McCrimmons were known pipers in Cumberland County.
The sandpipers of the Sandy Hills.
Huh, yeah. They even apparently tried playing cow horns on hunts. And WHB has this great quote, "Mount Helicon echoed for many a year to the horn of the hunter, in the hands of those famous McCrimmons who were pipers of great repute in days lang syne." You can almost hear it.
Keeping the sound alive.
Yeah. Financially, they were like those 100-acre boys owned decent mid-sized farms. Comfortable, self-sufficient, but not rolling in dough.
Stable community members.
Right. Governor McLean's quote that WHB includes sums it up. None very rich or very poor. A place where a just estimate is placed on human values. When Angus died in 1819, his estate was worth $623.30. WHB calculates that as about 5.5 years' wages for a farm laborer then. Solid, but not wealthy.
And, looking at that historical period, it's crucial to include all the facts from the source material, even the difficult ones.
Right.
Your story by WHB is very clear based on the records. Angus's 1819 estate inventory listed only one slave, a Negro girl named Lucy, 11 years old, who was sold to John McCrimmon for $307. It's a stark detail from the records, showing how deeply embedded slavery was in the fabric of the American South at that time, even for families like the McCrimmons who were building new lives themselves. It's part of the complex reality WHB presents.
Okay, that context is important. But Angus had built a foundation. His wife Margaret and son Roderick expanded the farm to 315 acres by 1835.
Roderick seemed like the one who really anchored things there.
Yeah, he was the main beneficiary in the wills, stayed put, became pretty prosperous, died a wealthy man in 1862, right as the Civil War was getting going. The 1860 census valued his real estate at $1,000, personal estate at $10,000. That was serious money then.
So his branch stayed and thrived?
Looks like it. His sisters, Christian, Janet, and Effie, married locally and stayed too. Flora, the youngest daughter, apparently didn't marry. So what did this mean for the other brothers?
Time to look elsewhere.
Exactly. The homestead was established. They had to stake their claim somewhere else. They looked west. The next big move.
And the first one to really push west was Kenneth McCrimmon. WHB calls him a true pioneer of the family and the young nation of America.
What did he do?
He was a civil engineer and surveyor. Super important job back then. He actually charted a lot of Louisiana after the purchase. His work likely influenced decisions back in Washington.
Shaping the map, literally.
Pretty much. Records show him as a parish judge in Avoyelles Parish, Louisiana, way back in 1812. Later lived in Rapides Parish, Monroe. Clearly educated, ambitious.
That education theme again.
Right. His letters to his brother Roderick, which WHB mentions, show he was eloquent, even when describing hardships, like losing his wife and child on his frontier plantation in 1829.
Tough life out there.
Incredibly tough. He traveled a lot for work, leaving his kids behind. His daughter Effie, though, she was remembered later by a local paper as one of the most intellectual and remarkable women ever born in that parish. That intellectual spark carried on. Kenneth really embodies that westward drive, especially for skilled people.
And then there's Daniel Sr., your fourth great-grandfather. Talk about starting young.
How young?
The 1810 census in Cumberland County, NC, lists him living alone at age 12 or 13.
12. Alone.
WHB says it was par for course back then. Young men had to get out and make their own way. So he followed his brother John to Georgia for a bit.
Didn't stay there long.
Nope. By 16 or 17, he's applying for 200 acres down in Liberty County, Georgia, near the Altamaha River. Already chasing that land dream.
Wow, incredible drive.
And then, same county, age 18 or 19, he marries Rachel Curry, your fourth great-grandmother, Talk about a whirlwind youth, just bam, bam, bam. Independence, migration, land application, marriage, very much that frontier spirit.
But their westward adventure got put on pause briefly by the War of 1812.
America's Forgotten War, as WHB calls it.
Yeah, it lasted 3 years. Pretty significant, but often overshadowed. America declared war on Britain in June 1812, tensions over expansion, trade restrictions, all that.
Did Daniel Sr. fight?
No definite records for him specifically, but WHB confirms 3 of his brothers served. Kenneth was in the Louisiana militia, might have even been at the Battle of New Orleans.
Wow, Andrew Jackson and all that.
Could be. June joined the Georgia Volunteers. And Roderick, back in NC, signed up for the North Carolina militia.
Roderick was young, though, right?
Yeah, only 12 or 13 when the war ended, so probably didn't see much action. But it shows how widespread the call-up was. Even these forgotten wars touched families everywhere, demanding service from citizens across the new nation.
So after the war, after getting married, Daniel and Rachel packed up the wagon again, headed further west, out of Georgia.
Mississippi bound.
Yep. Followed those migration trails, the Fall Line Road, the Federal Road deep into Mississippi. Joined other North Carolina Scots there. They were part of the wave helping establish Covington County.
Putting down new roots.
Trying to. They already had a daughter when they arrived, then had son Patrick in Covington in 1823, and then your third great-grandfather, John, in 1828. But they didn't stay put long.
Kept moving.
Yeah. By 1830, they're in newly formed Simpson County. That's where Daniel Jr. was born. And then before 1840, they move again, next door to Smith County, always chasing the next opportunity, it seems.
And Smith County, according to WHB, was proper wild country, and not because of the local Choctaw folks. Apparently relations were okay there.
So what made it wild?
WHB points fingers at the infamous Sullivan family from Ireland. Real characters.
Like outlaws.
Sounds like it. Nicknames like Hog Tom, Wild Bill, and Red Jack. Known for stealing, gambling, and gunslinging. Their area, Sullivan's Hollow, was basically synonymous with lawlessness.
Yikes. So not just taming nature, but dealing with dangerous neighbors, too.
Exactly. It paints that picture of frontier life, not just wilderness, but unpredictable human elements, places where the law hadn't really caught up yet. You had to be tough, self-reliant.
So Daniel Sr. and his family, they hopped from Covington, founded 1819, to Simpson 1824, to Smith 1833. Always moving to the newest county.
Chasing that dream of landing their own plot.
That's what WHB suggests. Chasing perhaps the dream of securing their own land that each new county offered. But here's the really poignant part, especially compared to his father Angus back in NC.
He never got his land.
WHB says there is no record of Daniel Sr. holding any land in Mississippi. He died in 1843, never having achieved that core American dream for himself.
That's rough. All that moving, all that effort.
It really underscores the struggle, doesn't it? The perseverance needed. It actually took another generation. His son, Daniel McCrimmon Jr., finally secured land in Smith County, 119 acres, but not until 1892, using the Homestead Act of 1862. Took that long for that branch to finally own their piece of Mississippi. And the family story keeps mirroring America's story, leading right into the Civil War, starting April 1861, another huge upheaval.
Tearing the country apart.
And for Rachel, Daniel Sr.'s wife, just imagine, she saw all 3 of her sons enlist in the Confederate Army.
All 3 boys off to war.
Yep. Your third great-grandfather, John, signed up first, June 1861, in Raleigh, Mississippi. Joined Captain Ward's company, later Company C, 8th Mississippi Volunteers. His younger brother, Daniel Jr., joined the same company, but later, December 1862, down in Bridgeport, Alabama. And Patrick enlisted around the same time, December 1st, 1862, but in the 4th Mississippi Cavalry. A whole family committed to the cause.
And considering the carnage of the Civil War, what happened to them is pretty remarkable. It speaks to that family resilience again.
Did they all make it?
WHB says Daniel Jr. survived the war as a teamster. Driving wagons, maybe less direct frontline fighting, but still dangerous. John and Patrick. They were formally taken as POWs right at the very end, May 4th, 1865, in Citronelle, Alabama.
After the surrender.
Yeah. When captured, John was listed as invalided with debilitas, basically, weakened, worn out from the war at a hospital in Meridian. But here's the amazing part. Their mother, Rachel, who lived to be 77.
She saw them all come home.
WHB says she had the rare fortune of welcoming back all her sons, which was incredibly rare in that war. Just amazing luck, endurance, whatever it was, they survived.
And as we wrap up this huge story, we circle back to Scotland to see what legacy remains there.
So's footprints on Skye.
Exactly. The actual walls of the piping college at Borreg crumbled away by the 1800s. But WHB emphasizes the footprints of your family are still all over Skye.
Tangible reminders.
Yeah. Dunvegan Castle still stands, that symbol of the MacLeods they served for so long. The McCrimmon cairn at Borreg, put up by the MacLeods in 1933, showing that respect lasted centuries.
Still honoring them.
And maybe most movingly, at St. Mary's Old Church in Kilmuir, where those 10 generations are buried, there's that plaque in Gaelic and English.
What does it say again?
This tablet is erected to commemorate the McCrimmons, of whom 10 generations are interred in this place. They were the hereditary pipers of MacLeod, and for a period of 3 centuries were distinguished for their gifts as composers, performers, and instructors of the classical music of the bagpipe, 1500 to 1800 AD. Just lays it right out. A powerful tribute.
But maybe the most profound legacy, like WHB concludes, is the music itself. It is firmly embedded in their music that is enjoyed all around the world.
It lives on.
Totally. The tunes, the methods, the art form they shaped on that little island, it's global now. Pipers everywhere play their sewol more, compete with it, teach it. It's achieved this incredible immortality through sound.
Oh, wow.
And it raises that final question, doesn't it? How do these individual family stories, like the McCrimmons, rooted in one place, manage to cross time and geography to leave such a permanent mark on culture? It's the power of art, tradition, dedication echoing down the years.
What a journey we've unpacked. Seriously.
Yeah.
From bagpiping royalty on Skye with possible Viking roots
Right,
to mastering this complex music, surviving wars, clearances, that brutal Atlantic crossing, and then pioneering lives in North Carolina, Sandy Hills, and Mississippi's wild country. It's just a lot of history in one family line.
It really is. The McCrimmon story, it's just a powerful example of resilience, isn't it? Adapting, holding on to skill and tradition through everything. And it makes you think, doesn't it? How do the things we build today, maybe through art, maybe family, maybe just sheer perseverance, how do those things echo down the centuries? How do our choices, our moves, our efforts to keep culture alive or embrace something new, how do they weave into that bigger story of history that connects us all?
Something to think about. How does your own story connect? Keep digging, keep asking questions. That's what these deep dives are all about.